Okay, I think that we're on the final part of the final video in the build series. I hope you've enjoyed it so far, and for those who are building along with me, I really hope that you're pleased with your efforts so far and that you're pleased with yourself. This last bit isn't too difficult, but I think adds a really nice finishing touch to the model. You can see that the wires for the lights are quite hidden, and actually the lights are flush against the back because we're going to be filing down the LEDs before they go in. Parts wise for the rear lights, I've got some 100 ohm resistors. Having calculated the resistor values that we need for the red LEDs, using the same method on the computer as we did for the front lights in the previous video, and I'll just put a link up there in the corner, I was able to work out that the recommended resistor for the two red lights in series was actually 180 ohms. What I'm using here is I'm going to be using 2 times 100 ohms, which is going to take me to 200, which will reduce the current going through the LEDs and slightly dim them, which I think is better for rear lights. We're going to be using 2 of these red 3mm LEDs. I've pre-cut some silicone wire of the very thin variety, and in the description below I put a link into Component Shop where I bought this by the meter. So for the red I pre-cut that to 8 inches, and I've got a couple of 8-inch lengths of the black. Plus also throughout this video I'll be using various diameters of heat shrink. It is good to have a variety of sizes available to you to cope with the different diameters that you need. Okay, without further ado, let's get cracking on this last bit. The starting point is to take the 1.8mm drill bit and, as close as possible to the centre, drill 2 holes in the middle of where the rear lights are, and you can see the moulding. There's one there and there's one there. And then taking the 2.5mm bit, expand those holes. The reason why I like to build the holes up is it helps keep them central. That's that. And then taking one of the red LED lights, what we're going to do is use the reamer to gradually expand this hole until the light is quite a tight fit in it. The diameter of the LED is around 3mm, but I wouldn't trust a drill bit for that. So just open the hole up a little bit, test it a bit more. Test it again, it's getting closer. That's probably a little bit too tight, so just a tiny bit more. And I think that that should be okay. Do the same for the other side. The next thing which I want to do is I want to file the very end, this dome on the end of the LED, I want to file it flat, but being very careful that I don't go as far as the little metal bits inside. I think it's the anode and cathode, so I'll just do that. If I go too far I'll use another one, but only until the very end of it is flat. And I think that that is just about okay. I'll do that for the other one, and I think that that's good too. The next thing I want to do is I want to take one of them, and noting that this is the longer wire which I'm going to be bending, the longer one being the positive connection, I'm just going to bend that leg back. I'm going to leave a little bit at the bottom, but I'm going to bend it fairly close like that. And then I'm going to chop it about 5 or 6mm from the base, like so. I'm then going to flip it upside down so that the bent piece is against the wood, and then I'm going to take one of my resistors and I'm going to lay it alongside like that. What we're going to want to do is we're going to want to solder these two pieces together, and it can be handy to use some clamps like this to position pieces like this. So let's just get those in there. Okay, that's just about where I want it. I'll get some solder on there. And then I'm going to take a second resistor and I'm going to chop both of these quite short because I want them close together. So probably only about 1 centimetre on each. And then I'm going to solder these two together. Again, I'm going to use the clamp to put them into position first. Get them fairly well lined up and get some solder in there. And then I'm going to chop this one and probably again leaving about 1 centimetre or so. And then taking my red wire, I'm going to strip and tin that, and I'm going to stick that onto the end here. Always a good idea to tin the end of the wire there. And that all looks okay. And then find some heat shrink that will actually go over the resistors. So this one here seems to, and I think that the diameter before it's shrunk is about 2.5 millimeters, and you're going to want enough to go all the way up to the LED and slightly onto the wire. So I'm going to chop that about there, spread it on and shrink it down. Okay, the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to bend the other leg of the LED back so that it's parallel with the first one, and chop it off again probably 7 or 8 millimeters from the end. Pop that in there. Tin the end of one of our 8-inch pieces of black silicone wire. There. Tin the other leg. Just get a little bit on there. This time I can use much thinner heat shrink. I think this one's about 1.5 millimeters. That actually goes on much better. And I think that we're about ready to install this light. The light is going to go round the back here into this hole that we made on this side of the truck, and the wires are going to pass through behind this bit here and actually underneath where we put the plugs. It may be a challenge to get it through here, and if you find that there was too much glue stuck in there, there's no harm in pulling the plug off, cleaning off the glue, and then putting the wires across, but I think that I may get away with it. So I'm going to start by putting my light in, and it doesn't do any harm to have something to push it with. If you find that it is really too stiff, just open up the hole a bit. We're going to be gluing the lights in, so if it is loose it doesn't really matter. I think that mine is actually a little bit tight, so I'm just going to loosen that a bit more. Okay, maybe I've made that a little bit too loose, but it really doesn't matter. And then we're going to ever so gently tuck all the wires down in the gap. Just take your time with this, otherwise you'll end up having to do it all again. You can pull out the back of the bumper a little bit. Let's get that in there. That's all nicely in place. And then I'm just going to position the light exactly where I want it and make sure it's straight. What I'm aiming for is for this light to be absolutely flush with the bit there. That's okay, it does move backwards and forwards a bit, but we'll come back to that in a minute. We need to make sure everything works before we start gluing things or putting stickers on. And then both of the black and the red wire are going to need to pass under the plug here. You may find it easier just to pull the wires back that are already underneath there to make space for it. I'm doing the red one first. Okay, that seems to have come out the other side, which is good. Let's just grab that. I shan't pull it tight yet, but I don't want it pulling back through. And then I'm going to try and get the black one through as well. I can just see that peeking through. That's it. And then I'm going to carefully pull the red one through. Being careful not to snag any wires. Just a little bit at a time. Good. And so we've managed to get it such that the two resistors actually finish before you get to the plug, and it all sits in there very nicely, held down by the fact that it's a little bit tight there. Okay, so that is essentially this light done. We're now going to move on to the other light. Before we install the other light, I've just made a couple of extra holes here in the back using the 1.8mm drill bit. So there's one there and then one below it. And we're going to thread our red wire through the lower of the two. So let's post that through there. Pull it through from the other side, and then that is going to tuck behind this piece here, making sure that you push it down so that when this screw here goes in, it isn't going to try and screw through it. So let's pull that down, push it in, and that's going to be the red wire ready to connect up inside the car. This black wire here that we've just pulled through underneath the plugs is going to be soldered onto the long positive leg on the other LED that we filed down. So taking that other LED, we're going to bend the long leg, and you can see here that I've got it on the right hand side. We're going to bend that at 90 degrees, quite close, like so, and then 7 or 8mm down we're going to chop it. And then we're going to shorten this black wire so that it's going to be able to let the light go in there and there not be too much hanging around. With wire, it's always best to have it a little bit longer than you need, because if it's too short you're going to be in problems. If there's loads of it, that can lead to problems in itself. So I'm just going to line up with the end of the bumper there and chop it. Strip it, tin it, position our other LED, tin the other LED, and then just before we stick them together, get some heat shrink on the black wire. Again, I'm using the 1.5mm one. I do find that it can be quite hard to get hold of these much thinner heat shrinks. I think that I probably bought mine from the component shop at one of the model shows, but I'm sure it can be found online. Pull the heat shrink well back so that it doesn't start shrinking before we're ready, and get that stuck on. Pull up the heat shrink, and now we can bend the other leg. Chop it. Tin it. Strip and tin the last 8-inch piece of black silicone wire, get those attached, and add another length of 1.5mm heat shrink. Just seems to make the joint so much better, and you've got no danger of shorting either. I'm going to take out this bolt, and then taking the long length of black wire, we're going to thread that through the other hole that we made in the back here. Just pull it through a bit, and then we're going to insert the other bulb into the hole here, again enlarging the hole if it's just too tight to go in. Okay, that's in. Very carefully pushing all of the wires behind this block here and out of the way, and while you're doing it the bulb will twist around in its hole. Just do that. You want to push these well down so that they're going to be nowhere near that bolt. The long wire here is going to go around the back here and through the hole, so you can start to pull that a little bit tighter. Making sure that it goes around the back there. Just push it down a bit. Definitely past that bolt hole. Yep, that's definitely completely out of the way, and all of the wires on this side are away from the securing bolt for the body. So that's all of our underneath bit done, aside from the putting on of the stickers, which we're going to come back to in a minute. So flip the truck back upside down, and we've got our two wires which are going to be connecting to the rest of the lighting circuit. These first of all need to pass through the two holes over the back axle here, so we'll just thread those through. Easiest to do them one at a time, and maybe push the other wires out of the way while you're going through. There's the black one, there's the red one. Just want to push these down so that they're not going to interfere with the body when it goes on. If you find they keep bouncing up, a spot of glue will probably sort that. Okay, so now we have the red and black wire from the back, and I'm just going to trim those to make them the same length, plus the 2 wires from the front that we did in the previous part of the video for the front lights. Before we go any further, just like we did with the front lights, we're going to test the rear lights using the spare terminal block. So I'll just get that wired up. I need to strip these first and get some solder on them, and then putting the power wires into the terminal block, and these 2 rear light wires that we've just taken from the back, making sure that the polarities line up. Quick tug on those to make sure that they're not loose in there. Turn down the exposure on the camera, plug in the battery, and by the way, this is genuinely the first time I'm testing this. Turn on the radio control and let's see what happens when we push channel 3. There we have it. The rear lights coming on and off, which means we can now make these connections permanent. Undo the terminal block. For this very last bit, I'm going to be using both 4mm and 2mm heat shrink. Take the 2 thin red light cables, so one from the front, one from the back, twist them together and get some solder in there. Put the 2mm and the 4mm heat shrink on, and then solder to the red wire. Pull up the 2mm heat shrink as far as it will go. Heat it up. And then the 4mm should just about go over the 2 thick wires. And that's that done. And then just do exactly the same for the black wires. Okay, so that's all our soldering done, and we can just tuck all of the wires away, just really so that the body will go on easily. And I think that that's alright. We've actually managed to do a pretty neat wiring job throughout this build, which makes it much easier to sort out if you get any problems later when you're having to reconnect things because they've come loose. But again, if you put it together well, you should never need to take the body off again after this. And now I'm going to put the rear stickers on, and I'm going to try putting them over these lights to see if enough shines through. Get them on as straight as I can. I'll just turn my studio lights off and let's see what we think. Okay. I think that I'm actually quite happy with that. The LEDs seem to give off a nice diffused light, which is quite realistic. I actually prefer this look to the other one where I had put the stickers on first and then made holes in those. I'm actually really happy with that. Right, all that remains to be done now is to put the body back on, put on the rest of the stickers, and the model's going to be finished. I'll be back in a moment. Okay, I think that that is the truck done, and that takes us to both the end of this video and actually the end of the series. I really hope that you've enjoyed following along with the build, and if you've built one yourself, I know that you're going to find it great fun. Being 4-wheel drive this thing is actually a little bit more capable than you might imagine, and I think that the lights make a very nice touch. If you've got any comments or questions, please ask them in the section below. I'm always more than happy to try and help if I can, and I'm sure others will jump in and answer if I don't manage to get to it quickly. As some of my more regular viewers might have spotted, I've had about 6 months off from doing videos, and this is the first one which I've done in quite a while, and that has in large been due to the fact that my wife was very ill last year, and touch wood, things are actually starting to look up now, so I'm getting back into doing the videos. I do intend to carry on doing quite a few builds, and I've got 1 or 2 owing from the previous run videos which I did, and those are going to include things like the skid loader, the big trucks, etc., where I've developed 3D parts on the computer which I'm going to make freely available through Thingiverse for people to download and to follow the builds. I think that the next build is probably going to be the skid loader, however I'm going to need to develop some 3D parts before I do that, and in the meantime keep up the Bruder builds, and as ever, thank you very much for watching.